Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am here with Rachel Martins of Rachel Martins Coaching, and we're going to talk about prioritizing connections today. So thanks for being with us, Rachel, and thanks to our viewers for joining us on this virtual learning journey. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, it's so fun to be here.
It's so nice to be here too, to be with you and learning alongside you. And we're keeping it real today. So if anyone hears noises in the background, definitely probably most likely my family. So here, you can come say hi. All right, Rachel, gonna turn it on over to you.
All right, thank you. I am so excited to be here tonight. We are going to talk about prioritizing connection with our children, why it is important to do it, and how we do it. And like Megan said, I like to keep everything really real. I have three children, three daughters that range in age from almost 11 to 16. And so everything that I talk about has been vetted in the lab of my own home and with my clients. And so what I promise you tonight is absolutely no fluff, just like real information that will help improve the quality of your life and the quality of your family's life immediately. So that's my promise to you. My name is Rachel Martins, and I am a lifelong Western Mass resident. I was born and raised in Hatfield, where most of my family still lives. I live in Belchertown now with my three daughters and my husband and our dog. We live a pretty crazy life over here, as you might imagine. I am also a public school teacher. I have been an ESL teacher for the last 20 years, and I currently work in West Springfield Middle School, working with immigrants, with refugees and migrant children, which is work that I also really love to do, and that dovetails really well with the coaching work that I do. So, I am a life coach in addition to being a teacher. And as a life coach, I work with people to identify goals and develop a plan to achieve them. So, what that looks like is me providing support and guidance and accountability as you move through the process of trying to achieve your goals, as well as offering an outside perspective for blind spots that we all have in our own lives. And one of the ways that coaching has really transformed my life is in my parenting. I came to parenting full of ideas about the kind of parent I wanted to be. I was going to be cool and fun and connected and in tune with my child. And then I met my strong willed first daughter. She was energetic. She never slept. She never stopped moving. And I had literally no idea what to do. This triggered in me a massive fear response, and I became convinced that I didn't know what I was doing at all or how to keep my child safe. I had no idea how to even meet her basic needs, never mind and be like a connected, cool parent. And in this overwhelm, I went to really the only place that I could think to go, which was fear and control. I tried to force my daughter to behave, to sleep, to eat the right foods, to behave the right way. I yelled, I punished, and I did the opposite of all of the things that I had come to parenting wanting to do. I abandoned who I was, and I rejected completely who my child was. This didn't work, as you might have imagined. And it resulted in this path through my early parenting years that felt like a constant struggle. I wasn't having fun, it wasn't joyful, and I had almost none of the open hearted connection that I really, really wanted with my girls. I didn't have time for it, right? I was too busy like managing and controlling and telling them who to be. And the result of this was like me going to bed every night, just feeling like a failure and feeling so guilty about how I was parenting. I loved my girls so much, and I knew that I wasn't being the mom I wanted to be, and I couldn't figure out a better way to get there. Finally, this pain just became too much for me, and I decided to find a new way. And as luck would have it, I was in a coaching program at the time, and I was able to use the structure and support and tools of the coaching program to guide me to make the changes that I really, really wanted to make. And with this support, I did make the changes, and I found a way through parenting that feels fun, that prioritizes connection, that honors who I am and who my kids are. And I am so proud to say that I have a wonderful relationship with all of my children today. And despite the fact that I live in a home with 3 teen or tween daughters, which is like all the drama and emotion you can imagine. We have a good time most of the time, and I go to sleep almost every night feeling really satisfied and confident and great about the way that it has gone that day. So we talk in parenting and in coaching a lot about connection, but this is like a vague notion. I think it's something of a buzzword these days. And what does it even mean, right? What does connection mean really? And how do we do it? I know that I've made the mistake in my life before of like latching on to ideas that I didn't fully understand. And it really doesn't really work out. You know, it's sort of like building a house on sand. It kind of crumbles because when the ideas get tested or questioned or looked into, it's really hard to like validate them or to back them up because I don't really know what I'm even talking about, right? So in the effort to combat that, I wanted to spend tonight getting really clear about this idea of connection. So what is connection? Why is it important in our relationships with our kids? What are the benefits that can come of it? And how can we really create it in a meaningful way? So that's our plan for tonight. I hope that it will clear up any questions that you have around connection, and then get into some ways that you can implement it in your relationships right away today. And you might be surprised by some of the ways. It is not going to be more floor time playing with your kids or more playing in the sandbox with them. I think that you will love some of the ideas that I want to share with you tonight. So let's jump right into why connection is important. And I think that if a great place to start is with attachment theory, because this is a really big part of our why. So I'm not sure what the knowledge of the participants here is about attachment theory. So I'm just going to give a really quick overview of it. So our attachment behaviors are evolutionary behaviors that support our survival. Our attachment behaviors are the system that guides us in our patterns and habits of forming and maintaining relationships, which, if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, was critical to our survival, right? We needed to be a part of a tribe in order to not starve to death or be eaten by tigers or dinosaurs. So it is evolutionarily in our DNA, right? As part of our blood. And the attachment that we get from our caregivers as young children really affects the foundation of all future relationships that we have all the way through adulthood. So when we can be attentive to our children's needs by prioritizing connection with them, knowing them well enough to know what they need, and being their emotional regulation as they develop the capacity in themselves, and by being their safe place in hard times, our children are able to build the secure attachment that allows them to move forward in the world from a strong base with confidence. And it also increases their ability to develop healthy relationships with others. This is what we all want for our kids, right? We all want our kids to grow into adults who feel secure in their place in the world and with those who love them, because this will then allow them to take this security into all of their future relationships. This is something that is on my mind so much, having daughters, as I think about who they will choose as partners and as friends. I want them to know what it feels like, to really know what it feels like to be seen in a relationship, how it feels to be safe in your authenticity in relationships, and maybe most importantly, by contrast, to understand when it's not present, to be able to say, this relationship does not feel like what I know a healthy, safe relationship feels like, and so I have to leave it. And an example of this is my youngest daughter is 10. She's going to be 11 on Thursday, and she's been in a friend group for the last year or two, the same friend group. And over the last 6 to 9 months, she's gradually come to see that she doesn't really like the way that some of the girls in this group are treating her. And because she has been raised with a strong focus on secure and safe relationships, it's easier for her to see, by contrast, that the same isn't present in these friendships. And she knows in her bones that she deserves to be treated better. And this gave her the confidence to step away from these friendships, which is so hard to do in 5th grade, especially as a 5th grade girl. And I'm so proud of her. And I know that one of the reasons that she's able to do this is because of the secure connection and relationships and safety that she has at home and that she's come to know growing up in this way. So that's our first reason, is that if we can prioritize connection with our kids, it really gives them this really strong and safe foundation for all of their future relationships. Another reason that it's important to prioritize our kids, prioritize connection with our kids, is that it improves their safety as they navigate the world more independently, which is the goal, right? Our goal is to get our kids to be able to be independent outside of our home without us, and to be able to do it effectively and safely. So when we prioritize connection with our kids, we are helping them develop resilience, decision-making skills, and emotional intelligence. All of these which will increase their safety in the world. For example, when our children make a mistake, and rather than shame or punish them, we get curious about what happened, why it happened, and what our child would do differently next time, we help them develop self-compassion, decision-making skills, and the ability to be self-reflective, all skills that will allow them to be more confident as they move through the world. In addition, when we make connection with our kids, one of the main priorities in our parenting, by holding space for them in their big feelings, their venting, their mistakes, we are clearly communicating that no matter what they have going on, we are their safe space. This will then develop in them the habit and the feeling of safety to come to us when they have a problem. Because here's the thing, we cannot keep our kids safe. There are so many risks out in the world for our children that we would never, ever be able to anticipate and prevent all of them. But what we can do is make damn sure that when something bad happens to our kids, when they are hurt or when they are unsafe, that they feel safe enough in their relationship with us to come to us. When I started to do this work with my own self, in my own family, this was one of the foundational principles that I really latched onto and embodied, was that the most important thing that I could do in my relationship with my kids is know that when something goes wrong, that they felt safe coming to me, because that is truly the most effective thing that we can do to keep our kids safe, is be a space that they can come to. And this came up recently in my life. My 16-year-old was preparing to go to New York City with some friends, and she was really excited about it. And she came home the night before, and she was like all in a tizzy of emotion, and I couldn't really figure out what was going on with her. And like, the old version of me wanted to say something like, "What is wrong with you? Why don't you like get control of yourself and go to your room?" Or, something like this. But I have done so much work around creating connection and about knowing my children, that I was able to recognize that there was a need underneath all of this big emotion. And so as I gave her space to talk about it and to explore what she was feeling, it came out that she was feeling really overwhelmed by the details of the trip and the finances of it. So she snuggled up to me on the couch, and we went through this. And by letting her process what she was feeling, by helping her brainstorm and problem solve sort of on her own out loud, she was able to unload all of this anxiety, and it was all sort of soothed, because as we all know as adults, like when we are anxious, it's all just like swimming around in our head, making us feel really awful. And once we can download it, it like empties our brain out a little bit, right? And so once she did this with me and we talked through what the anxieties were, she then had a plan that she felt confident in. And had I not spent so much time prioritizing my connection with her, I might have missed this opportunity with her. She might have had to figure this all out herself. And that would have been the tragedy in that situation. So by prioritizing connection with our kids, we really can help keep them safe. I firmly believe, actually, that it is the most important thing that we can do to keep our kids safe out in the world. Before I go on, I want to just pause for a second. That was kind of a lot, and see if anyone has any questions or comments on any of that before we move on.
All right, a question in the chat box, Rachel. At what point did you realize as a parent that you needed to change the way you were parenting?
I realized it pretty quickly. My oldest daughter was probably 4 or 5, she might have been 6, and I had just had a third baby, and my middle daughter was 2 or 3, and I knew because of the way that I felt at the end of each day, because I have always been a person before I had children who felt really strongly about the relationships in my life and the connections in my life, and I recognized at that point that I wasn't feeling that, and that was my signal that something was wrong. I also was yelling all the time. I was yelling all the time, and I was talking to my kids in a way that I knew I didn't hadn't historically spoken to anyone in my life. I'm not usually a yeller, and I'm not usually someone who criticizes a lot or uses judgment. And I came to realize that those were traits that were showing up a lot in my parenting. And that was sort of the red flag for me that something had to change. And I remember my sort of breaking point, it was during the pandemic, and I was out for a walk with my friend, and I had had a really hard night the night before, and I had gone to bed crying because I felt really just like so awful about myself as a person and as a parent. And I thought, something has to change. This is it. I'm not going to waste any more of my energy feeling bad. I would rather use my energy to learn how to feel good. And that was the turning point. And it's not perfect, but I have never gone back on it.
Thanks for sharing that, Rachel, and thank you for being so vulnerable with your journey and your feelings.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I receive it. Any other questions before we move on? Great. So this is the one that I think is really going to speak to a lot of parents, our next reason for why connection is so important. And that is because it supports cooperation. We all want to know how to get our kids to listen better. And by saying listen better, what we really mean is cooperate with us, right? We want our kids to put their laundry away, or stop fighting with their sibling, or do their homework, or make good decisions around drugs and alcohol. Whatever the thing is, we want them to do it when we ask them to do it. But the truth is that our kids accept or reject our guidance because of who we are to them, our relationship with them. And that is the only reason. I guess the only other reason would be out of fear, which is like another school of parenting, right? That is when you see kids who are like super compliant, it is mostly because they're compliant out of fear of consequences or repercussions. But aside from that reason for compliance, the reason that our kids are going to do what we ask them to do is because of the relationship that we have with them. And so when we approach our kids with connection and curiosity first, our children come to see us as a person who seeks to understand who they are and what they are going through, rather than as an authority to be feared or like gotten around, snuck around. When we approach our kids' problems and missteps with compassion and curiosity, by asking genuinely curious questions about why things happen, we seek to understand the underlying emotion or need of our child when we are their safe place for their big emotions. And when that happens, our children see us as on their side, right? We become their partner in all of this. It's us and them versus the problem, rather than us versus our child and the problem. And this focus on compassion, listening, understanding, and support naturally encourages our kids to want to cooperate or listen to us. So, for example, when I see that the dishwasher hasn't been emptied, which I can assure you happens many a day in my house, rather than getting mad and telling my daughter, "You're so irresponsible, you're so lazy, you've just been laying in bed, you haven't done the dishes, what's wrong with you?" I approach her with curiosity and an understanding, right? And I can say to her, "What's up with these dishes? I see that you haven't done them, and you know that we try and get them done by now. What is getting in your way?" When I come at them like that, it makes it much more likely that the next time I say, "Hey, why haven't you done the dishes?" that their brain is going to say, "Yeah, I'll do it, because I know that mom is always trying to understand me. She's always on my side. She always seeks to understand where I'm coming from." Now, I just want to be really upfront about this. They're not going to say those things out loud, right? This is a very subconscious process that is going to go on in your child's brain, but it is more likely to happen if they believe that you are a person who seeks to understand them, who seeks to really understand that they've had a long, hard day at school. They had a fight with their friend. They had two tests. They whatever the thing is, and that they can't do the dishes tonight. And you know what? Okay, I'll do the dishes tonight, right? When I can give that to my kids every now and again and really understand them, then when I say to them, "Hey, you got to get these dishes done," they're more likely to do the dishes or whatever the thing is. So if you want more cooperation from your kids, connection is going to be a really powerful tool to get you there. Another benefit of connection is that it allows you to better know your child. So you will instinctively know when something is off with your kiddo. One of the key components of connection is listening. So if we can seek connection through listening, then we will know our kids better and we'll be better able to care for them in appropriate ways. And listening, just to take a little tangent about listening, is one of the most powerful tools we have with our kids in general. And when I talk about listening, it's not the kind of listening where we listen so that we can then give them good advice, or we listen so that we can then have our turn to talk. We are going to listen to our kids without saying anything, without offering advice. We are going to listen just for the sake of listening. And that is so powerful. That tool is very, very powerful. So when I think about the benefit of connection being to know your children well, to know when something is off, I think of a novel that I read some years ago in which there was a young child, a little girl who was maybe, I don't know, 8 or something, and her mom was dying of cancer. And she had developed a story in her mind that if she wore this outfit every day, that her mom wouldn't die. And she was in the care of her extended family, and they didn't have that connection with her, and they didn't seek to understand why she was wearing that outfit every day. They just said, "You can't wear it anymore, take it off." I think they might have even thrown it away. Whereas had they had a stronger connection with her and they could have engaged her with curiosity and in listening around, why are you wearing this outfit every day? Why is it so important to you? What is it with this outfit? Then it could have really like decreased the pain that this child was feeling. It could have offered her a lot more compassion and connection and care, as opposed to sort of magnifying the difficulty of the situation. So although that's a fictional example, it sticks out in my mind all the time as such a powerful example of how when we seek to listen to our children and approach them with curiosity, we can then really have a much stronger foothold in caring for our children in ways that support them. This is a big one, okay? Another reason to have connection is because it creates more joy in the relationship and in the job of parenting. So I'm sure there is not a parent out there who needs to be told this, but parenting is hard, right? Even when everything is going really well, parenting is hard. We are responsible for everything in our own lives. We have jobs, we have to keep the house, we have a relationship, we have other children, we have all of these things that we have to do. And we are also responsible for the constant care of little people who are often disagreeable and demanding. And this goes on for a minimum of 18 years, although I have to admit that I am 47 and still call my parents sometimes for support and guidance. So honestly, I think if you're lucky, it never ends. And so it's hard. Parenting is hard. And the more that we seek to have the goal of our parenting be in connection, the more fun and joyful this marathon of a job can be. If we can seek to find times when we can connect with our kids in ways that we enjoy, if we can actively listen and engage with our kids about the things that they are interested in, if we can seek to learn their idiosyncrasies so that we can better understand and respond to their behavior, then we really are creating a relationship with them that is more fun, that is more love-filled, and that is more joyful for not only them, but also for us. So that is my list of reasons why I think that creating connection in a relationship with our kids is so, so important. It keeps them safe. It makes it more fun. It allows us to know our kids better. It helps them cooperate more, and it sets them up for a lifetime of healthy relationships. So before I move on to the how of creating connection, I'm going to pause for another moment and see if there are any questions or comments that have come up while I've been sharing this.
Hi, Rachel. I'm just checking the chat box, and there's 3 questions. The first question, how do you balance your want to develop connection as a parent with a teen's developmentally appropriate behavior to not want to talk or to push you away?
So that is so normal, right? Our teens, I have 2 teenage daughters currently. They do not want to talk to me most of the time. Um, However, you can really encourage your kids to talk to you by the way, well, first of all, by the times that you choose to show up to them, right? Like, so if your child is mid, I don't know, Candy Crush or like whatever kids play on their phone these days, which I honestly don't even know, and you sit down, you're like, hey, tell me about your day, right? Like, they're not going to necessarily want to talk to you in that way. However, hey, can I take you to Starbucks? It looks like you've had a hard day, might get some comments in the car, right? So there is some thought about how and when you seek to connect with your children in this way. Another thing that really was excuse me, super critical in how I changed this with my kids was that for a long time, I was like, why won't my kids talk to me? Why won't they open up to me? Why won't they talk to me? And then my brain went, hey, how are you showing up asking for your kids to talk to you? And I started to play over in my head, like, how am I showing up? And I realized that I would like walk into my daughter's room and it was a mess, right? Like their rooms are a mess. And before I said anything, I said, oh my God, your room is so gross. Who even lives like this? I think there's mold growing on your clothes. Like I just, and why are you on your phone again? And I can't believe you're still in your bed, right? Like all of these things I would say. And then I would sit down and go, how was your day? And she didn't want to talk to me. And of course, she didn't want to talk to me. So when I started reflecting on the way that I was showing up, trying to engage my kids, I realized that I was showing up judgmentally, I was showing up critically, and I was showing up to like tell them what to do. And when I thought about how much I would want to talk to a person who was showing up in my life like that, right? Like if I had a friend who every time I told them anything, they were like, yeah, that's a stupid thing to do. Or, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. Or why does your hair look like that today? Or like whatever the thing, I probably wouldn't want to open up to them either. So I thought about how can I show up to these relationships, these moments in time that would encourage them to want to talk to me. And for me personally, that was non-judgmental, without criticism, open-hearted. And when I started to show up in these moments like that, I found that they were more likely to open up to me. The other thing is that sometimes connection with teens doesn't look that much like what it looks like here in Megan's screen, right? Like it's not so much kids wanting to sit and be with us all the time. It might be them wanting to sit next to you on their phone. It might be them wanting to go for a car ride with you. And one of my daughters was always like, oh, you're going to the store, I'll go with you. She didn't want to necessarily talk to me, but she did want to be with me. So I think especially when we're talking about teenagers, it's really important that we recognize that the way that they are going to seek connection is going to, number one, be much different than the way our younger children seek connection, and also might be different than the way we want them to seek connection. And that is going to have to be okay, because as we get to the teenage years, they are the ones who sort of dictate how that connection happens. Was there another one?
There is another one. What are some strategies to be a better listener as a parent? It's hard to keep quiet.
Yeah, totally. That one I feel deeply, and honestly, the truth is you just have to commit to being quiet. You just have to. I have a whole I can include it when I send out the information after this. I have a whole sort of protocol about how to talk so your kids will listen. And some of a quick run through of those steps are that you have to first get yourself really emotionally regulated, get your face right, get yourself calm. The second is you want to approach your kids with curiosity, right? You want to not say, why is your room such a mess, but something more along the lines of, what do you think's getting in your room of keeping, what is getting in the way of keeping your room clean, right? So curiosity, and then just being quiet and listening. And sometimes I will literally bite my tongue. I will bite my tongue because I want to say, that's not true. That's not right. That's not the best way to do it. I want to tell you how to do it. I know so much, right? Because this is all true. I do know a lot of things that I could tell my kids, but that is not the point of listening. The point of listening is to allow your children to feel heard and to feel understood and to know that you care about how they feel. And so it really just takes the resolve of, before you sit down to talk to them, deciding, making the decision, I am not going to talk even when I really want to, even when they say something stupid, even when I know something better. I'm not going to talk. My goal of this conversation is to listen. And it's not always easy, but I promise you that it pays off.
My problem is that my face has no inner voice. My face is
Yeah,
all outside voice. Like
I know
even
that.
when
I
I
know.
bite my tongue, even with my spouse, my eyes are like,
I know. It's a practice for sure. I found myself recently when I was like kind of in an under-resourced place. My daughter said something and I was like, that was like I wasn't saying anything, but I was like, I can't believe you're saying that. Like, what you're saying is so absurd. So it's like, and they see it, they see everything. They see every little, they've been looking at our faces for 16, 18, 20 years. They know every nuance of our face and what it means about our emotions. And so this is a practice that it is really, really worth investing in.
that's funny. I need to practice. Put it on my list.
Your husband.
One last question. How do you balance the idea of connection with not being the fun parent that doesn't have any boundaries?
You know, that one is tricky, right? Because in my family, my husband is always like, "Yeah, let's play one more video game. Yeah, let's have Lucky Charms for breakfast. Yeah, let's." And I'm like, "We need to have some fruit for breakfast. Like, let's go read a book." Um, but the truth is that if you can consistently show up as a calm place, as a person who seeks to understand your children, because on the fundamental level, all humans, myself and my children and you all, just want to be heard and understood, right? Like that is what we want in this world, is to be heard and understood. And so it's, even if it's not always like the fun, it's not always like as much fun as it is to play a video game, is to like have your mom listen to you. It still is, will create a situation with you and your child where, when they're not looking to have fun, right? Like when they're in a bad mood, when they're scared, when they're nervous, when they're having a fight with a friend, they're going to seek you, right? You don't always have to be the fun parent, I guess, is the answer. Sometimes you can be the safe parent. Sometimes you can be the reliable parent. Sometimes you can be the parent that your kids are going to know has their back. And there's so much value in that, even if your kids can't say it. My kids used to say to me, if you and dad ever get divorced, I'm going to go live with dad, right? And the reason they said that was because like dad was going to let them have more screen time and more junk food. And they knew that. But as my kids, especially as they've gotten older, I see the shift in them when they're having a really hard time. They know that I am going to be there for them, that even though I didn't let them have the screen time that they really, really, really wanted when they were 10, that they know that I have their back, that I seek to understand them, that I will sit with them through their difficulties. And that has tremendous value, even if it's not being the fun parent.
When my daughter tells me that I'm not the fun parent, and I hear that from her even at 4 quite often, I always tell myself, you're the default parent. You're the consistent
Yeah,
one, right? Like I
totally.
might not be fun, but I'm always here. Like I'm always by your side.
Yep. And it is not, there's not a lot of, it's like, it's almost like, as a sports reference, like being the offense versus the defense, right? Like the offense gets all the glory. They score all the goals. Everyone claps for them. But the defense is the solid, reliable, keeping things safe situation. And it's almost the same. You can't win a game without defense, right? Like you can't raise a healthy kid without being that default parent, without having a default parent, a reliable parent, a parent who's always like the safe place for their kids. And it's not as glamorous, right? And it doesn't get as much press, so to speak, from your children, but they know, right? They grow up knowing, and It really, the other thing I think it's really important to think about is that parenting is a long game, right? We are a lot of the things that I'm suggesting you do in the moment might not feel like a win necessarily. They might not feel like you are coming out on top or something like that. But the goal is the long game. The goal is to raise children who can be healthy adults, who know how to move about the world and keep themselves safe and have safe relationships and be resilient and be good problem solvers and decision makers. So if you can look at that as the goal rather than like the dishwasher getting unloaded or being fun, then I think it changes the perspective and allows you to really sort of keep your eye on the prize.
I love that.
Yeah.
That reminds me of, I grew up playing tennis. And I think about the best tennis players, they aren't always the ones who can hit the winning shots, because a lot of times those winning shots, they're like once in a while moves, but the most winning players are those that are consistent and get the ball back every single time. The consistency pays off. But that's the long play, right? And sometimes it's hard to see, especially when you've got emotions flowing and you might be thinking about that winning shot, right? Like getting the dishwasher unloaded right away.
Or having your kids say, I love playing with you, mom, right? Like we are humans, right? Like we
Yeah.
like to be told that we're awesome and that they like to be with us. And that validation and feedback doesn't necessarily come in the short term, in the moment. And so it really takes sort of rising above that and saying, hell, this stings a little bit that my kid just told me that if we get divorced, that she'll go live with my husband because I try so damn hard all the time. But to be able to rise above that and see, I understand what's going on here. And I also am really rooted in my value of connection. I really feel strongly about why I am doing this. And that is helpful in helping get through those moments that can be hard, honestly. Anything else before we dive into how to create connection?
There's nothing else in the chat box, and I don't see anyone raising their hand, so I think we're good to go.
Great. So then let's talk about how to create connection. We are clear on the why of it, but how are you going to do it in your life? So I want to walk you through several ways that you can integrate connection into your life starting tonight or tomorrow if your kids are already sleeping. One of the foundational pieces of being able to prioritize connection in your parenting is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is another one of those buzzwords. I think these days people are talking about it a lot. And I think that is for good reason. I believe that many of us grew up in a time when no one was thinking about these things, and sort of our ability to regulate or control our emotions or understand our emotions or self-soothe sort of maybe developed or maybe didn't. And so a lot of us as adults are now just starting to understand this idea of emotional regulation, and trying to figure out how to give it to our kids. So one of the most important aspects of how we connect with our kids is how we are able to help them understand, process, and feel safe in their big feelings. If there's anything that kids have, it is big feelings. And in order for our kids to feel safe in their connection with us, as well as feel safe in their own big feelings, they need to know deeply that their big feelings don't scare or overwhelm us. This makes it imperative that we can manage our stress response or emotionally regulate ourselves in the face of our kids' big feelings. So before I go any further in this conversation, I want to take a moment to help us all understand our nervous system and our stress response. So I'm going to make this very simple and quick, but in short, our body takes in what is happening around us through our senses, and our brain, which is the captain of our nervous system, interprets this information so our body knows what to do. When your brain interprets information as danger, and this could be anything from a tiger chasing you to your toddler or teen screaming in your face, your brain tells your adrenal glands to release this stress cocktail of adrenaline, epinephrine, and cortisol. And what this does is it prepares your body for the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response in order to protect your safety, right? Your brain is telling your body you are not safe, you need to like do something. And so this cocktail of hormones hits your bloodstream and your brain shuts down completely and your body takes over. So you are like fully out of your wise brain and fully in your stress response. And this is what we might call dysregulation, right? And you might have heard people who can like lift cars off of people when it's a dangerous situation, right? Like this is that stress cocktail doing that for them in their body. This is also when we lose our shit on our kids, right? This is also when we are unable to think rationally when our teen is screaming at us and we go right out of our smart brain and we go right into our sort of hyped up brain. And so what happens after this stress response comes in and all the cocktail of chemicals is coursing through your body, allowing you to lift the car off the person or scream wildly at your child, is that then the chemicals eventually start to dissipate and they leave your body, and your body uses its parasympathetic nervous system to come back to a non-stressed state. The problem is that many of us parents and many people in general are living in a state of chronic stress due to the demands on our time, our overwhelm. We're constantly jumping from one stressor to another, which leaves our stress cycle incomplete, right? Meaning that we don't ever, those chemicals don't ever fully leave our bloodstream and we never get back to that non-stressed state between stressors. This can lead to sleep problems, anxiety, anger, depression, and lack of patience with the people that we love a lot. For this reason, it is really, really important that we take actions to make sure that we are completing the stress cycle or decompressing between stress responses, right? So what this really looks like is because we don't necessarily have the say about when stressors come at us, right? Like they might come at us all the time. So if we can make sure that on a daily basis, once or twice a day, we are doing things to activate our parasympathetic nervous system and sort of cool things down, then that sort of helps in the long run. So although we might not be able to do it in the moment, if we can do it on a regular basis throughout our lives, then this gives us, our body, the ability to cool down more regularly or as a part of our natural life. So ways that we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system to do that are connecting with other adults. A call to a friend or a little bit of time with your partner can be so powerful. I can recall a time that my kids were really little. I had all three of them, but my youngest was probably 2, and we were at Target, and we had one of those trips to Target where like they were driving me insane. I was like, I think I'm gonna just put you guys on the shelf here and I have to go, which I didn't do. But when we left, I was just really frazzled and they were like little kids bouncing off the wall. And I thought, I don't even know how I can do this for another second. And in the parking lot, we ran into one of my dear friends who has children that are friends with my kids. And for about 10 minutes, we stood in the parking lot and we talked. I talked to her. I was like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. And she talked to me, and the kids danced around and did whatever they were doing. And after 10 minutes, I felt like a whole different person. My whole self was soothed just from this very short conversation with a friend. So connecting with other adults is so important. That might just mean a text, that might mean a quick phone call, that might mean 10 minutes with your husband or wife in the other room, like whatever it is. That can be a really, really powerful way to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and get yourself calmed down. Another thing that you can do to help this is move your body. I don't know if you've ever noticed how even like a short walk in the fresh air can totally shift your mood. So this could be anything from yoga to a hike to a simple walk. But doing something to sort of move the blood and the hormones and all the juice through your body is a really powerful way to keep yourself sort of not living permanently in that stress response. It doesn't have to be long. A 5-minute walk, if you're like losing it, take a 5-minute walk outside, right? Or do 2 sun salutations, like whatever your thing is, or put on music and dance like a crazy person. I heard recently that humans are the only species that doesn't do that like shake, that dogs do, that like wild shake. And that kind of shake, if that feels right to you, that movement of our body is a really powerful response to stress. You can take some time in nature. So this might mean just simply putting your bare feet in the grass in your backyard. You can take a hike in the woods. See if you can notice the shapes and the sounds and the smells around you, just really taking in nature. Studies have shown that time in nature has a statistically significant reduction of worry and stress and an increase in joy. And we are so lucky here in Western Mass that there is so much nature available to us, right? Like many of us live in places that we at least have a backyard, and some of us live in places where we have woods very close by. So being with nature can really help this as well. Another way that you can strengthen your parasympathetic nervous system is breath work. And while this might sound like a big deal, it is really just taking a minute or two to put your hand on your belly and one on your heart. Or if you're driving, you can just put one on your heart and breathe. And if you can notice where you are physically experiencing a negative emotion like fear or anxiety or anger, you can then just sort of talk to it, right? You breathe into it. I'm feeling some tightness in my chest. There's a lot of anger right there. I see you, anger. I know that you're here to keep me safe, and I'm okay right now. Why don't you step aside and rest? And it is 1 minute of breathing is so powerful in calming down those emotions. In fact, I had my therapist told me once that within 60 seconds of like not a panic attack, but like when you're when you're all jazzed up, 60 seconds of deep breathing is enough to sort of stop that stress response and start to calm it down. So breathing is free. It is available to all of us at any time, no matter what else we're doing. And it is super powerful. One that I love using is the 5 senses. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but it's asking yourself, what are 5 things that you can see, 5 things that you can, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And what this does is it gets you out of your head and into your body, and it happens very, very quickly. I do this a lot with myself. It is particularly powerful, I find, when I am trying to sleep and my brain is like, but what about, what about, what about, what about? And I start to lose it. I say, well, let's just open our eyes and let's look around the room. And by the time I get down to the 1 thing that I can taste, I have brought myself fully back into my body, and I am much, much calmer. And I do this, you can use this with your kids as well. My youngest daughter has been doing this since she was 5 or something. It's really easy. I think kids are taught this in school actually these days. So another way, the last one that I want to talk about to sort of calm yourself and help you be more regulated, is journaling. And this is just a brain dump. This is another one that is like almost like breathing. It's just about free. It is accessible to everyone. You can do it on your phone. You can do it with a piece of paper and pen. But my journal has a 100% rate of calming me down. I feel better 100% of the time that I sit down with my journal. And the way that I like to envision it is that I've got all this stuff in my head, and when I journal, it drains right out of my head, down my arm and onto the paper, and then it leaves my head nice and empty and calmer. So journaling is super, super helpful. As a side note, I am obsessed with journaling. I've had a journaling practice since I was 17. It is part of my morning routine every single day. And if anyone on this call would like to know more about journaling, you can send me an email and I would be happy to talk to you about it, because I love, 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 love journaling. So those are ways that you can help yourself be more emotionally regulated on a regular basis. Those are all powerful tools to use in the moment when you are not feeling emotionally regulated, but they're also really powerful tools to use. Like, you should try and do at least one of those things every day, which will help you sort of overall be a more emotionally regulated person, so that when you are triggered, which you will be, we all are every single day, your nervous system is going to be able to settle itself down more quickly. Questions about that? Any questions before I go on?
One question in the chat box. Does having a glass of wine help calm down your parasympathetic nervous system?
Well, I can't actually speak to the effect of wine on the parasympathetic nervous system, but what I do know is that we all know what helps us, right? And that is sort of a really important tool, is knowing yourself well, knowing yourself well enough to know what you need in the moment, and be able to support yourself through difficult times. So this is a judgment-free zone. And if a glass of wine is what you need to be able to, or what you want to be able to be calm, so that you can show up in a calm, regulated way for your kiddo, there is no judgment around that. So prioritizing, this is one of my favorite things to say, prioritizing connection over correction. So this is one of the most powerful changes that I made in my parenting, and it has yielded some really profound effects. So this is a really, really great way to create connection. I used to think that one of my primary jobs as a parent was to teach my daughters how to do life right. Right. And what this often looked like was that when they made a mistake or a misstep, I would criticize them. I would tell them what they did wrong. I would lecture them about why it was wrong. And then I would tell them what they should do right. And I thought that I was like killing it. I thought that this was how you parent. And I also was doing it very much from a place of love. I thought that what I was doing was in my kids' best interests, and that they needed to learn, and that it was my job to teach them. However, when I finally got clear on my priorities in parenting, and I started to evaluate my actions for alignment with my priorities, what I saw clearly was that my most important job was not to tell my kids what they were doing wrong and how to do it right, but rather to seek connection with them so that I could be their safe place when they made a mistake or a misstep, rather than their bully in those moments, which, if I am very honest about it, in my children's early years, I was their bully in those moments. And that was, I'm certain, not helpful at all to them. Around the time that I was like sort of having this revelation myself, I heard Mel Robbins use the phrase connection over correction, and it all made sense to me. When our kids make a mistake or they fail at something, can we show up to that with connection, right? Like, it's pretty easy to show up to your sick kid who wants to snuggle on the couch with connection, or to the dance party in the kitchen when you're really feeling it with connection. But can we show up when our kids mess up? Can we show up to that with connection? Can we hold their big emotions with our emotional regulation, teaching them how to emotionally regulate, via example and modeling? I think it's so funny when we think about, and I am so guilty of this so many times, when our kids are having like a big emotional reaction, and we respond equally as big to tell them to calm down, right? Like, that process does not actually make a lot of sense, even though it is one that I know that I have gone to naturally many times. So can you hold space for your kids' reflections when they mess up? Can you seek to understand why it happened, why whatever happened before you go to it with judgment? So I just want to take a minute here to talk about consequences, because I know that sometimes when this conversation comes up, people start to think, okay, great, but my kid just can't be causing chaos or messing things up and have no consequence for their actions. Like, that's not real life. And you're right, that is true and that is valid. But here's the thing. We are not letting them get away with anything. We are just prioritizing connection in that moment, right? We are giving ourselves permission to put the pause on the consequence, not to say my kid can run around Target throwing toys all that they want. it's cool because my connection with them is the most important. What we're saying is that right now, I am going to attend to my child's emotional need and to the connection with them so that they know that I'm their safe place. And then later, when I am more emotionally regulated and when my child is more emotionally regulated, then we can have a conversation about the consequences. We can have a conversation sort of about reparations. Like, when you were really mad, you threw my cup and it broke, and that was my favorite cup. So let's talk about how we can fix that situation, right? Whether it's cleaning up or it is some sort of small restitution that might be appropriate. So we're definitely not saying consequences do not come from sort of mistakes or missteps that our kids make. We are just saying they don't have to be doled out in the moment. I know from personal experience that when my kids have done something bad, right, when they've made a mistake and I'm really mad about it, that I might come down with a consequence that the next day I'm like, what was I thinking? That was not fair. That was not nice. And it's because I was all jacked up in that moment. My kid was all jacked up and I was all jacked up. The consequence had no real effect on their future behavior because they were so like, wow, that they couldn't take it in. And it wasn't even what I wanted to do. I just was so dysregulated. So yes, consequences, but if you can give yourself permission in the moment to have that elusive pause and to say, we are not going to get into consequences right now. That will be a question for a little bit later when we're both calmed down. Right now, I'm going to seek to understand and be curious and be reflective with my kiddo. Um, so that is another really effective and sort of, I don't want to say easy, but simple, right? A lot of this stuff is simple, although not easy, but that's another way that we can really prioritize connection with our kids is by seeking to have connection over correction. That is a phrase, if you leave here tonight with anything bouncing around in your head, I hope that that is the phrase that sticks with you, connection over correction. Another way that you can create connection with your kids is to lead with love. We all love our kids, that goes without saying. And also the overwhelm and responsibilities of life and child rearing, as well as the constant input from everywhere about how to parent, what to prioritize, how to keep our kids safe and help them be successful. It can make our heads spin. It can make me be like, what? And this can lead to some reactions in situations that are not always aligned with the deep love that we feel for our kids. So, like, for example, when they ask a million times if they can have more screen time after we've said no, or when they accidentally hit us in the face when they're having a tantrum, or when they break our favorite mug doing the thing we told them to just stop doing. In these moments, we can easily lose our cool and yell, lecture, shame our kids. Right? I told you to stop horsing around and then you broke my mug, right? That's where the shame comes in. And these are words that have come out of my mouth. So I just want to be really clear. There is no judgment in any of this. We are all living this reality. But in those moments, if we can build connection by creating the habit to pause and ask ourselves the simple question of how can I lead with love in this situation? For example, in the situation of them breaking my favorite mug, it's important to remember that you do not have to rush into saying or doing anything. As long as everyone is safe, it's not that there doesn't have to be a consequence for breaking your mug, but it doesn't need to be addressed right there in the moment of heightened tensions. So first I can take a moment to care for myself and my disappointment because that is also real. That was my favorite mug and I'm so mad that it was broken. I'm so disappointed that it was broken. So I'm going to give myself a moment to care for myself in that moment. And then I can say to my child that that my child also knows that they made a mistake, right? And this is the same thing that I think about this a lot. This is the same thing that I know. I make mistakes all the time. I bet that you make mistakes all the time too. I break stuff. I forget things. I mess things up all the time. And when I do it, I know that I've done it. I feel bad already because I have a whole system in my brain that lets me know, shoot, you broke that mug. That was the kids drew on that. That one came from our vacation, right? Like I already feel bad about it. And I don't need someone to shame me on top of that, right? Like I've got this internal system of it. And so our children are just the same way. Even little kids, they know when they've made a mistake, and they are usually already feeling bad in their own bodies when this happens and in their own brains. So if I can ask my child if they're okay, did you get hurt when that mug broke? How are you feeling right now? And then evaluate, why did that happen? What would you do differently next time, right? Even a very young child can answer those questions and sort of be led with your love and your curiosity, as opposed to your judgment and your shame. And finally, I can also remind myself that I can remind my child that there is nothing that they could ever do that would make me not love them, right? There's nothing that there's nothing that you can ever do. There is no mug that you could break. There is no words that you could use. There's nothing bad enough that I will not love you. So we care for ourselves, we get curious with our children, and then we remind them that there's nothing that they would ever do that would make us stop loving them. And then when the moment has passed and everyone has calmed down, I can tell them, I feel really sad that my mug was broken. Can you please help me clean it up? Right? Or can you contribute to me buying a new mug, even if it's just like a quarter or something? It's sort of this symbolic gesture, because it's like also part of our job to guide our children and not shield them from the responsibility of their mistakes, right? Like when I make a mistake, I don't want to be shamed, but I also know that I have to take responsibility for that mistake. And our kids are going to have to learn that as well. So if you can, even in very difficult situations, if you can ask yourself, how can I lead with love here? How can I lead with curiosity here? How can I be reflective and teach my kids to be reflective? That is a really powerful way to create connection with your kids. Another way that you can create connection with your kids is to filter all of your responses and decisions through the lens of connection. So when your children come to you having made a mistake or asking for something or asking permission to do something, if you can use the filter of connection to make your decision, that will, every time you do that, that will build connection in your relationship with your kiddos. So again, this is simple, but not always easy, right? I feel like there's so many things in parenting that are like, oh, that's very simple, but it's not always that easy. But it can be the simple act of asking ourselves, does this create connection or disconnection? It is such a powerful question. What I am about to say or do, or the decision that I'm going to make, does it create connection or does it create disconnection? The thing is that all of the things that we have already talked about, the stress and the overwhelm of life, as well as all the voices of your mom and your mother-in-law and Instagram, internet telling us how to parent the right way, can make decision making tricky, right? But when we keep it simple by asking that question, does this create connection or disconnection? It can help to stay clear in the midst of all of that noise and other people's opinions. So an example of this would be recently my 16-year-old came to me and she asked if she could stay home from school. It was the last day before winter break, and I believe school is really important. I'm a teacher. I think my kids should go to school every day. And so my initial response was, hell no, school is important. You need to go. That's what people do. What will people think if I just let her stay home from school? Will they judge me? You have to go to school, right? I imagined my mother-in-law's voice in my head being like, you let her stay home from school? What are you doing? Or my friends, or even honestly, my husband. I knew that he was not really for that. But then I filtered her request through my priority to create connection. And I asked her for her reasons rather than just saying no right away. And she laid out some pretty solid reasons. She was burnt out from all the tests and papers. They were watching movies all day in school. She wasn't really going to be doing anything. And her need for sleep felt more important than her need to watch a movie in school. And so in my pursuit of connection with her, I want to assess her needs and I want to support her needs. And so I said yes. A decision that I never would have thought that I would have said yes to, right? Like that was not something that I expected to say yes to. But when I filtered that decision making through the lens of connection and through the lens of seeking to understand her and have her feelings and reasons be valid, it made it really easy to make that decision. So if you can use that filter of connection, is this creating connection or disconnection, as a means to help you make decisions, it will, every single decision will move you closer and closer and closer to connection with your kids. The next one I think you're going to really like. One of the most powerful ways that we can create connection with our kids is through self-care of ourselves. I believe that one of the tragedies of parenthood and motherhood in particular is the notion that in order to be a good mom, we have to be selfless, literally without self. This is in almost all of the messaging that we receive in the media and in society, that in order to be a good mom, we abandon ourselves, we abandon our needs, our desires, and that which makes us us in order to care for, nurture, and support our children. I totally did this. As soon as I became a mom, I left behind so many things that were part of the person that I was. In fact, I spoke earlier about my deep love for journaling. For the first entire 10 years of my parenting, I did not journal. I did not pick up my journal. Maybe I did every now and again to like cry about how bad things were going, right? Like once every 3 months or 4 months. I totally abandoned my lifelong habit of journaling. And other things too, right? Like I wasn't spending time with my friends. I wasn't reading. I wasn't doing yoga. And this creates for us as parents this sort of double problem. One is that we lose ourselves and the things that we want and love. And the second is that it doesn't work actually, because when we leave ourselves off of our priority list, what actually happens is that we are less likely to show up for our kids as the parents that we want to be, right? We think that I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to make all the cupcakes and I'm going to get to all the events and I'm going to give up all of myself in order to be this great parent. But what really happens is that we are so burnt out. Our cup is so empty that we're showing up impatient. We're showing up without the capacity to listen and the capacity to connect. And you know what? Our kids see it. They know it. We think that we're doing great, but in reality, we are being counterproductive to our goal of being a good parent, because we are not able to show up as the well cared for, nourished, fulfilled person our kids really need. We are short, we are irritated, we are resentful, we are exhausted, and that shows up in how we show up. I recently heard Dr. Becky, the parenting expert, say that what our kids need most is the sturdiest version of their parents possible. And that does not mean the version of their parents that is always present for everything that they want. What it means is that it is the version of their parents that is the most well cared for and has the most capacity to show up with connection, with calm, with love, with patience, all of these things. So to that end, one way we can create connection with our kids is to engage in self-care. And the really beautiful bonus of this is that we're modeling self-care to our kids, right? Like it might feel okay to me to burn myself out to be able to give everything to my parents, but what if I'm watching my daughter do that? I'd be like, oh, honey, you need to take better care of yourself. I want to model that now so that my kids grow up knowing that this is how you do life. You do life by caring for yourself and for caring for others, right? It's a balance. And just a little bit about self-care. This is a term that gets thrown around a lot, right? And it often sounds like a spa, right? Or a pedicure or a massage, right? Something like this. And when we talk about self-care like that, it makes it really far out of reach, right? Like I can go get a massage twice a year or something like that, right? So I can only care for myself twice a year. But it's actually not just that. And also I think that the other end of it is like, yeah, I took a shower today. I cared for myself, right? Or I brushed my teeth today. We were talking about earlier. I cared for myself. And neither one of the ends of that spectrum is what we want to be talking about when we're talking about self-care. What self-care really is noticing what you need on an ongoing basis and whenever possible, giving it to yourself. It is caring for yourself in the same way that you care for the other people in your life. It is putting yourself back on your to-do list. And I just want to talk about a couple of ways that you can do this that are really accessible, that are not costly in either time or money. This one is so powerful. This one has a lot of capacity to change your life. And it is just to get in the habit of asking yourself a few times a day, but especially when you feel bad, what do I need right now? And if possible, give it to yourself. When I started doing this, I was surprised by how many times I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. I'm thirsty, right? Like I'm so busy caring for everyone that I didn't even take the water, that I like pause and I go, oh my gosh, I'm so thirsty. Why am I not drinking? Right? Like these are the very basic things that we are leaving off of our self-care lists. And if you can let go of that story of like, I'm too busy to care for myself, I gotta feed the kids, I gotta get them to their sports, I've got to get them to sleep, right? Like these are all the things that we tell ourselves. And if you can instead, in the habit, once or twice a day, start with once a day, pausing and saying, what do I need, and then giving it to yourself, that is a really, really powerful self-care tool. Another powerful self-care tool is to reconnect with who you are and what brings you joy or fills your cup or lights you up. I think sometimes it's hard to remember this, but before we were parents, we had a whole life that was full of things like hobbies and friendships and volunteering and any other pastime that you can think of. And then we became parents, and caring for another human took over everything, and who we are can get totally forgotten about. But abandoning yourself takes a toll on your well-being, and when your well-being is not looked after, you cannot show up as a reliable source of safety, love, and care for your child. Even if you think you are, your unmet needs are visible to your kids in the types of interactions you are having. um, I know that when I first became a mother, I dove so fully into being good at it that I lost some of the things, as I mentioned, that were really important to me in my pre-mom life. And we need to get these back. Sit with yourself, ask yourself, what do I like to do? What makes me feel lit up? And once you have the answer to those questions, put them on your calendar. Literally open up your phone and put yourself on the schedule. If you think about it, everything that you need to do is on your calendar, right? But are you on your calendar? Put yourself on your calendar. This is a really, really powerful self-care tool. And the last suggestion that I want to make about how to create connection with your kiddos is to nurture your relationships with your kids in the same way that you nurture the other relationships in your life with your partners and your friends. We all know the importance of nurturing our relationships with our spouse or our partner, as well as with our friends, right? We make special time for those people. We do special things with them. We tell them when they are being awesome. We show up for them when they're having hard times. We write them letters. We buy them little gifts. We can nurture our relationships with our kids and create connection with our kids in exactly the same way. Just because we gave birth to them and we keep them alive and provide for their every single need does not ensure a connected relationship with them. We still have to work to create the close connected relationship that we want. So there we have it. There is all of the really important reasons that we want to create connection, the benefits that come from creating connection, and also a list of some ways that you can start right now creating connection with your kids. I want to pause there. We are almost out of time, but I want to see if there are any questions that came up as we were going through that.
Rachel, I don't see any questions in the chat box at this time. And I don't see any hands. I have to say I had a big funny aha through this presentation too. Almost everything you were saying could also be related to prioritizing connections with your significant other. Like it's
Yeah.
like fill in the blank, right? Like what family member, which friend, like, yeah.
Or coworker or boss. The truth is that most of the concepts that we're talking about here are just like good relationship concepts, right? Like we are speaking of it through the lens of parenting, but all of these concepts can be applied to your partner, to your boss, to your coworker, all of it. Every relationship in your life will be improved with any of the strategies that we talked about tonight.
That's a lot of value we just got in an hour and a half.
I hope so. That's my goal.
Rachel,
Yeah.
if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So I can be found on Instagram at Rachel Martins with an S coaching, or on the web at rachelmartinscoaching.com. I will also be tomorrow sending out a little follow-up to this workshop with all of the ideas that I talked about will be put in print, because I know that it was a lot to take in, and it's hard to remember everything. I always think in the moment, I will remember everything that is being said. And then I remember like 5% of what was said. So I'll send out a little email to everyone with the stuff that was in here. And then if anyone has any questions, they can respond to that email. It'll be my personal email address. And I would be happy to dive deeper into any of this with them. I also would love to say that if any of the ideas that we talked about tonight, rang true with you, if any of them resonated with you and you would like to go deeper in this work, I have availability in my practice, in my one-on-one practice, to take on clients right now. And I would love to work with any of you to work through problems that you're having in your family relationship, with your parenting, or sometimes I like to think of it as just being a thought partner, right? Like parenting is really, really hard, and your significant other or your mother or your best friend can be really helpful, but sometimes it is also really helpful to have an objective thought partner to walk through this process with you. I certainly do for myself, and it has allowed me to be a much, much, much better parent than I was when I was just trying to like white knuckle this and figure it all out myself. So if anyone is interested in exploring that, I will include a link in the email where you can schedule a free call, and we can talk about sort of where you are in your parenting journey and where you want to be and how I can support you in getting there. So that, I think, is all that I wanted to share tonight. I am so grateful to have had this opportunity. Megan, thank you so much for opening the community classroom up for this important topic. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I love talking about it.
Thank you so much for your time, Rachel. And thanks to everybody for joining us or watching after the fact. Bye, everybody.